As we get started, today's a special day. It's a different day. It's a unique day. It's a day that is 5.5, almost 6 months in the working. When I became your pastor 5.5 months ago, I made you guys this promise that I really wasn't going to do much other than the main responsibilities of preaching and counseling and leading and just being there for you. I didn't want to change anything. I didn't want to do anything out of the ordinary. I just wanted to kind of be here, get to hear stories from Gateway people, get to know the culture of the church, get to be even in the community around us, hear what they say about the church. I kind of just wanted to fill myself with mindsets like that, and the promise that I had to you was that this day would come where I kind of stand up here and just give you kind of like my thoughts of where we're at, from what I've heard from you, from what I've personally seen, what I've heard in the community. So that's where we've arrived today. 2 disclaimers as we get started. The first one is this, that as I talk about maybe some things we could be doing better, or maybe some things we're not doing, or maybe the church has declined or something like that, it would be easy for us in our humanness to sit here and think, oh, he is talking about the last leadership team or current leaders or something like that. I need you to remove that thought from your mind, because here's the truth of how God works. God uses men in different ways. God used Abraham different than he used Moses. He uses King David different than he uses King Saul. He used Paul different than he used Peter. He uses Barnabas different than he uses Matthias. He uses men in different ways. So the vision that God laid on the heart of our previous pastor, Pastor Ray, is not the same vision that's on the heart of Mike Solomon. That doesn't mean we are at odds with each other. It just means that God wired Pastor Ray this way. He wired Mike Solomon this way. And then whenever my time is up here as your pastor, hopefully not today, the next guy that comes in, he will be wired differently and change things that I've done. So please, I beg you, one of the worst, most vile sins in the church world is gossip. Don't allow that to become a thing, Gateway, okay? Everybody say amen to that. Amen. So that's disclaimer number 1. Disclaimer number 2, as we get started, is this. That I promise that I am going to give you my heart and my thoughts as I truly have received them. That I will be honest with you and open. And even though it's going to be hard for me, even though it's challenging for me, I confessed this at the deacons meeting a few weeks ago, it's going to be hard and challenging, I have to tell you what I've heard and what I've experienced and what I've seen, and I need to be honest with you and open. Because here's the thing, if you go to a doctor with an issue, maybe you found a lump or you're tired or whatever it may be, you don't want to walk into the doctor and him just lie to you and just tell you to go home and eat something and walk on a treadmill or do something like that. You want the truth. Why? Because then you can diagnose the issue and then get an action plan to make your body healthier. And that's kind of what I'm trying to accomplish this morning as we get going. So those 2 disclaimers. I'm going to add a third one. After this talk, it's not really a sermon, after this talk of the church, we're having the fellowship on the grounds. Everybody is invited to come out and eat food and enjoy time together. Even if you didn't bring anything, you're welcome as our guest. But here's the thing, during that time is also going to be a Q&A where you'll be able to ask any questions that you may have based off of what I share with you today. Because those of you who've been around, I get to going, and I get to rambling, and I get to talking and spitting out a lot of information. It's going to be no different today. It's going to be the same thing. So have a pen ready, have a paper ready, have your phone ready, have something ready so you can take down questions, and no question this afternoon is going to be off the limits, okay? So those are my disclaimers. As we get started and we start talking about vision, in my conviction, there are really 4 legs to what makes a vision a vision. It has to be these 4 components in order for it to be a healthy vision. If you think of a chair, most chairs I think have 4 legs, right? And if you sit on 4 legs, it holds you, it supports you. If you take a leg away, it's a little wobbly, you can still stay up. If you take 2 legs away, you're in trouble. If you take the 3rd leg away, you're in some serious, serious trouble. And it's no different than with vision. So as we start, I want to talk to you about really the first leg of the vision. And the first leg of the vision is, number 1, vision starts with Jesus, guys. You might be like, oh, that's what I expect him to say. Well, I hope you expect me to say that. Vision has to start with Jesus. It doesn't matter what Mike Solomon's vision is if it's not being led by what Jesus' vision is for the church. And as we probably know, the Great Commission found in Matthew 28 tells us 2 primary goals and two primary things that we're supposed to be doing as Christians, as you see in verse 19, making disciples and teaching them. So when we think of this whole making disciples, we've got to ask this question: what in the world is a disciple? That sounds like a pretty religious word, right? Well, a disciple is pretty much a follower of something. Whatever you invest in, whether it's a movie or a book or a series or a personality or whatever it might be, a philosophy, you're becoming a disciple of that. You're becoming a learner of that. At the root of the word disciple is a learner. So we are to produce learners of Jesus, disciples of Jesus. When we talk of disciple, it is somebody who is sold out to follow Jesus. The second thing that I find interesting that we tend to forget a lot, is why I highlighted it, is that word make. Make. When we think of the word make, somebody's telling me, what does it mean to make something? To create. Yes, we can't lose sight of this word make in verse 19, because that is the heart of what it means to be a disciple maker, is to make something. You don't just haphazardly produce followers of Jesus. It's no different than, I'm sorry, Melissa, she always tells me I talk about food. It's no different than if you're making a cake. If you want to make a cake, you don't just expect a cake to show up. You got to put in the work. Some of you are lazy and buy the instant stuff. Some of you are legit and get the flour and the eggs and the oil and all the good stuff. But you got to go to Publix or wherever it is to get the product. You got to come home. You got to whip it up together. You got to bake it at 350 or 450, whatever it might be. And then you 350, thank you. I always overcook my food, so I probably would cook it at 450. Then you let it cool, then you ice it, then you can enjoy it. Get some skim milk, that's the best milk. And then you eat it. The cake, drink the milk, you enjoy it. You've made cake. Now, Jesus' great commission, his call to us was to make cakes. Again, we wouldn't expect them just to be sitting in the pews, right? We would have to put in the hard work in order to produce disciples. It takes work. It takes commitment. The second part of this part B is Acts chapter 1:8. He says, you will be my witnesses. The gateway, we talked about this a few months back. You will be my witnesses. Is that a suggestion? Somebody tell me. No. This is not a suggestion. It is a command. You will be my witnesses. And then the third part of this in Ephesians, he says that he's given leadership in the church for a sole purpose, to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. So leadership in the church has one sole purpose: to equip you guys, whether you're old or young, to be people who make disciples of Jesus. So as we get started, Jesus' vision for Gateway is that we be a disciple-making people, that we put in the hard effort, that we go to the store and get the ingredients, that we bake the cake, that we eat the cake, that we teach other people to do that as well along the way. So our sole purpose at Gateway is to find our identity in Jesus' final words, to go and make disciples. Now, that's leg number one of this stool or chair. Leg number two is this. Vision honestly assesses where we are at. Vision has to assess the problem. It has to assess an organization or a church or a relationship. You have to assess where the church is at in our instance. In the book of Nehemiah, there's this old book in the Old Testament named Nehemiah, and there's this guy who he sees an issue in Jerusalem. He's far away, but he finds out that the walls of Jerusalem have been destroyed. And he has this angst, he has this burden for Jerusalem to rebuild this temple, to fix God's city. And so what happens is he comes back to Jerusalem and he honestly assesses where the city's at, what needs to take place, what needs to happen, who he needs to get on his team in order to fix everything. And so when we get into leg number two of our chair, we got to honestly assess where we're at and ask this question. What was leg number one? Making disciples. Follow up. How are we doing fulfilling Jesus' vision and mission for our church? How are we doing? One of the things that I appreciated through the interview process for Gateway, becoming your pastor, was the honesty. That nobody on the phone or Skype interview or email never sugarcoated that we had some deficiencies. As a matter of fact, one of the things that excited me the most was from the actual listing for the job that I was applying for. It said this: during the past few years, the growth of our church has declined. Our future pastor must be willing to accept a real challenge. And when I read that, you could ask my wife, that excited me. Because God has wired me and designed me to be a starter of things. I've started businesses. I've started churches. I've started stuff. So when I read this, that's not a challenge to me. That's an exciting thing that God has called me to. But what it encouraged me to is the fact that the church knew where it's at. It understood that in recent years there has been some decline in numbers and decline in disciple making. So I said, as we were starting, that I had to be honest. I had to be honest. And so here is my honest assessment from talks with you, talks with past members, talks with current members, talks with people in the community, talks with pastors in the community, talks with leadership in the community. The conclusion that I draw is simple: that we are not a healthy church. Now, for some of you, you might sit here and say, that's not true. That's not true. But when we assess some particular areas of what it means to be a healthy church, we are failing. We are not fulfilling what Jesus has called us to. So, for example, the whole issue of discipleship. We're not doing that well right now. When I evaluate how we make disciples, there's not really a process in place. When I evaluate ministries, and when I evaluate money spending, or when I evaluate particular aspects of the church, it's not healthy right now. Now, I'm not saying all of Gateway is not healthy. There is some health here. I'm focusing on the things that we could address and that we could change that pertain to leg one of the chair, the disciple-making aspect. When we went through this process, one of the guys who was integral in helping the pastoral search committee know how to look for a pastor and what to look for, named Al Fernandez, he told the pastoral search committee, based off of his observation of where Gateway was at in 2018, that pretty much your next pastor, whoever it may be, will be your last chance to bring health to Gateway and to see the church stay afloat and to see this church survive. He said if the next pastor, which obviously is me now, fails or we don't change, he said Gateway is ultimately going to have to sell property, get rid of the place, or merge with another church. And I know that nobody in here wants any of that to happen. So we have to assess the issues. Here's more of my diagnosis as the doctor, is here's some of the reasons I think we are where we're at. Is number one, for the vast majority, we are a single generation church. We are a church that is full of seniors, older Christians, which praise the Lord for that. That is an amazing thing. My last ministry, we had a predominantly young, and we begged the Lord, send older saints, we need them. And by His grace, He started to. So praise the Lord. But here's the problem with that. I don't care if it's a single generation elderly church or a single generation 20-something-year-old church. That's not healthy. That's not healthy. The body of Christ should be comprised of all ages, all backgrounds, all colors, all languages, everything comprising the church for it to be a healthy church. Right now, we are not that. And here's the thing. Every single one of you that I've asked the question to, do you want to see younger people come to the church? Every one of you said yes. Every single one of you. Nobody said, no, I'm content. I like where we're at. So that is a problem being a single generation church. Again, not based off of age, but just the fact that that's all that we have represented in the congregation. Secondly, we have lost all young families. This is a cry I've heard from a lot of you over the past 6 months. We're losing them left and right. They've all decided to leave Gateway. And there are various reasons why. And some are valid, but I believe at the heart of why our youth are leaving, young couples, young families, our kids who have come up through the youth group, is because over the years the church has become irrelevant to them. It's not relevant in their lives. It's become to the point where it's like it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter. Here's honest Mike again. I've asked my kids the question, guys, if you turn 18 or 19 and the church stayed exactly how it is, would you guys stick around at Gateway? And they all said yes. And they said yes because, Dad, you're a pastor, you're a dad, of course we would stay. I said, okay, pretend I wasn't your pastor. Would you stay or leave? And every one of my kids said they would leave the church. Why? Because it's not relevant to them. It's not meeting their spiritual needs. It's not meeting their expectations, I guess I would say. That's why we are losing people, young people, left and right. It's not healthy. Additionally, one of the things that I've observed is there's not a strong core of male leaders in this church. I'm not saying there's no male leaders. But what I'm saying is there's not this strong core of this development of male leaders who are wanting to be trained for ministry and wanting to step up and be future pastors and future deacons and future leaders in the church. As a matter of fact, through my assessment, through my almost 6 months here, I have yet to find one-on-one discipleship relationship with any of our men in the church. That's what Jesus is calling us to, men. That's what He wants from us. Guys, yes, He wants us to love one another. The greatest way we love one another is by taking a younger man under our wings. Ladies, you're involved in this as well. I'm thankful that there are some men who are wanting to be trained and wanting to be equipped and wanting to step up and wanting to lead and wanting to be trained in discipleship, but as we currently stand, it's not there. Another reason we find ourselves in this situation we are is because there really is no vision. I've asked again a lot of you, what is the vision? What do we exist for? And for the most part, I get deer in headlights. Some of you, I get the generic Christian response. We're to love people, love God, the generic, but there's really no vision that is motivating what we are about as a people, as a church. Additionally, I find that leadership in the church is not clearly defined. We have titles, but we don't know what we're doing. There's no training. There's no discipleship, even with the head of leadership within the leadership teams. It's weighty in here, right? It's weighty in here. But there are some clues, visual clues to where we are at as a church. And I'm going to give you one that stands out to me. The visual clue of where we find ourselves as a church is that our ministry, our building, our facility has turned into a place of, I would just call it a storage facility. I mean, you walk around the church and we have rooms that just have stuff in it. Stuff. Whether it's church stuff, personal belongings. I mean, we just cleared out a whole upstairs of stuff. Here's the problem with that. Not that it's innately wrong. The problem with that is the heart behind it. What is our heart behind turning Gateway into a storage facility? We've given up. God, you're not going to use us. We may as well just store stuff away. We may as well just use up rooms. We're not going to use them for ministry. That's not the heartbeat to have. God is not going to use a church that has not equipped itself, cleaned itself up, prepared itself for future growth. Gateway, we have to change that. We have to be prepared. We have to be ready for God to use His church moving forward. We can't lose our hope that we have. I mentioned that I wanted to talk with people in the community as well. And again, this is my 100% hard. I'm going to go home. I'm just here straight honesty. I'm going to go home, sit on my recliner, and be depressed this afternoon because I don't like doing this. But I have to love you by giving you the truth. Being in the community for 6 months, I have yet to hear one positive thing about Gateway Baptist Church from non-churchgoers. That's what I'm talking about. I've heard negative things. I've heard a guy, he came in trying to get us to use our building to have a school. His name was Eli. He lives on the corner. And he said he moved there in 1981. He said in 1981 the church was like a big glowing light bulb. And he says over time, over a decade, he started seeing a transition. And then over the past 15 or whatever years, he said now that the church has become like a dim light bulb, it's not making an impact in the community. And he went on to even ask me, do you guys even have service there anymore? And I said, yeah, we have service. He said, well, it doesn't look like it. I said, yes, we do. I've talked with associational leaders. Hey, what do you hear about Gateway? And to be honest, it hasn't been good. I've talked with local pastors. It hasn't been good. I've talked with people in the neighborhood who have gotten run off of our fields just trying to throw a football around. They view the church as a place of, what's the word? A compound. We don't want you in here. If you're not like us, get out. It's not a good testimony to have in our community. Matter of fact, it's a terrible testimony to have. People sitting in these pews right now have said, look, we've turned into a country club over the years. We're not a church anymore. People say, look, if things don't change, I'm out. We got to take this seriously, guys. I know this is weighty, and I know some of you are probably disagreeing with me. But here's the thing. If you go into a doctor's office and he gives you some bad, stark reality news, and he gives you an action plan, you need to follow it, right? To bring health. And for us, we have to take this warning seriously. Getting outside of our bubble and listening to people around us. I read in the book, I shared this with the deacons a few weeks ago, it just stood out to me. This book, I think it's called Designed to Lead, by a guy named Eric Geiger. And in his book, he uses this illustration that I'm going to read to you. Hold on. Maybe I got ahead of myself. Yeah, I got ahead. I'll come back to that. Here's what he says. When we're talking about change. Change is extremely difficult. One of the most vivid and striking examples of this painful reality is the inability of heart patients to change even when confronted with grim reality. Roughly 600,000 people have a heart bypass every year in the United States. These patients are told they must change. They must change their eating, they must change their exercise, and quit smoking and drinking. If they do not, they will die. The case for change is so compelling that they are literally told change or die. Yet, despite the clear instructions and painful reality, 90% of the patients do not change. Within 2 years of hearing such brutal facts, they remain the same. Change is that challenging for people. For the vast majority of patients, death is chosen over change. We have to heed this warning. The slide I skipped was, this is attendance going back to 19, what was it, Bob, 2000? I think 2000, I was up there, 99. And then through the years down, we see this going from approximately, we can't see the side, it was 140 down to, I think it was about 40 during that time frame. So these are things that we need to take into consideration and take seriously. We have to heed the warning, or the outcome is not going to be good. The next leg is vision sees a bright future. That's the bad. That's the honest truth. But here is the reality. The future of Gateway is so bright. Do you guys see it? Let me ask you this in all honesty. Do you believe that? Yeah. God has given us so much here. He has given us the ability to have 10 acres in the heart of this community. He has given us people who love the church, who desire the church to succeed. He has given us a family of love who loves one another in a great way. The future is extremely bright if we take the warning seriously. If we don't take the warning seriously, it won't be bright. What is Jesus leading us to, guys? That's the question we have to ask. Is he leading us to comfort or to get out of our comfort zones? Is he leading us to please ourselves or to get into a community with the gospel of Jesus Christ? What is he doing? What does he want? The job posting, again, said this, and this is another reason I decided to apply after a month of praying and contemplating, and it said, the position will champion the mission of the church by implementing a clear and renewed vision for the body of Christ. He must be an excellent motivator to encourage the church's evangelical witness, and he must oversee discipleship training, which we're going to get to that in a second. So leg 3, bright future, Gateway. Bright future. Leg 4 is vision has a plan. Vision has to have a plan. See, in the church world and in our personal lives, we tend to see end results. Oh, we want our pews filled. We want disciples being made. We want, the church thriving. We see the A, which is the vision. We see the Z, which is the end result. But a lot of times we miss the process of getting from A to Z. How are we going to get from vision to people knowing Jesus? How are we going to get from vision to more baptisms on Sunday mornings? How are we going to accomplish this? There has to be a plan. Again, another analogy. You want to be, I'll talk to young kids, all young kids I ever meet. I want to be rich when I grow up. Okay. That's good. You got the vision A. You got the end result Z. How in the world are you going to accomplish that? Unless you are Donald Trump's kid, never mind. Unless you are a son or daughter of a millionaire, chances are you're going to have to work your booties off to get rich. You're going to have to go to college. You're going to have to take jobs you don't want. You're going to have to do internships. You're going to have to save money. You're going to have to do a lot of stuff to get to Z, right? And in the church, we have to do the same thing. We don't get to Z by just wanting it. We have to do something about it. So here's the plan. Phase 1, January, the first Sunday in January, we're going to talk about the State of the Church address, where we're going to come back and we're going to see where we're at as everything we said today. And then we'll give you vision going into the future. But phase 1, the next 6 months, these are the things that I want to concentrate on. Number 1, create a clean, orderly, modern, and welcoming environment for people to attend. Now, maybe right off the bat, you're reading that thinking, that is so lame. Like, are you talking about discipleship and this is what you're going to come up with? Well, I think hospitality and expecting visitors and guests to come to our church starts with this. Again, a lot of you've been here for many, many, many years, and I think you've lost sight of just, let's say, how dirty the facility is. Being honest with you, my first impression when I came down for my interview weekend is, man, this place is kind of dirty. I mean, the sanctuary's pretty good, but if you get outside the sanctuary, it's pretty dirty, guys. Bathrooms, fellowship hall. I mean, take a note next time, this afternoon, not to turn you off the food, but the floors need polished, the chairs are old, they're dirty. Like, the facility is kind of dirty. It's disorderly. There's not a whole lot of order here. All that leads to the welcoming environment, and then the word modern. That was my second impression. Man, this place, there wasn't one modern, updated room in all of the church. Now again, this is shallow. People don't come to Jesus like, oh my gosh, look how modern this is. Get me baptized, Pastor. I understand that. But this speaks volumes to where we are at as people with our facility. If it's going to be clean, if it's going to be modern, if it's going to be updated. If we are willing to adapt to my kids' ages, to 20-year-olds, to 30-year-olds, do we truly want that in our church? Everybody said they do. So now it's time to start putting some action behind our desires. I shared this again at the deacons as well. I said, how many of you guys grew up loving Toys R Us? How many of you love Toys R Us? A lot of you. As a kid, that was the place to go. I mean, your parents could drop you off. You could spend hours there just hanging out and being there, looking at the toys, desiring the toys, wanting the toys. How many of you then have seen, see if I'm up to where I'm at, how many of you have seen this recently? That's terribly sad, right? That's terribly sad. Jeffrey, the giraffe, packed up with empty shelves around him. Because every Toys R Us in America, a staple for children, has closed down. The signs they post, I guess everyone has grown up, there's no more Toys R Us kids. Is that true? Nah. What has happened, though, is that our kids, our younger people of this generation, they have moved on from what they had to offer. Toys R Us didn't adapt. Toys R Us didn't have vision into the future. They were seeing the here and now. Oh, kids all love coming to our box store. They all love looking at the overly priced toys. They all love just hanging out and running the stores and driving their parents crazy. They love it. They didn't see the rise of Amazons. They didn't see the rise of iPads. They didn't see the rise of iPhones. They didn't see the rise of PS4s and Xboxes and all the things that are going to take the kids' attentions away from them. Because they didn't see into the future, because they didn't adapt, they failed. They failed. See, we can't neglect our youth by holding on to preferences that we desire. Because what's going to happen is what's happened at Gateway already is our children have left. Our youth have left because in some sense we have become like this toy store. We have to be willing to adapt, and we have to be willing to change. So here's some things that I am proposing over the next 6 months that we do. Number one is that we update the sanctuary. That we change, that we modernize, that we get it to a place that is more modern than what it currently is. By God's grace, we have a slave here named Adam, and he is going to do all the work for us. But we've got to change. We've got to update the bathrooms, guys. The bathrooms have got to be widened. Yes. They've got to be widened. They've got to be cleaned. They've got to be updated. We've got to give order to the facility. I want the fellowship hall clean. I picture us using that in so many ways in the future for discipleship. But we got to start doing these things. What else I've jotted down? The children's ministry. We've got to update that as well. I feel so bad for kids because in the church, not Gateway, the church in general, kids are viewed as like second-class citizens almost. Oh, here's all the leftovers that you could have to try and fulfill and clean or make your room nice or whatnot. We've got to update those things. We've got to prepare this facility for God to use it. If we do not, He won't. Enough illustrations. That's a good one, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to go there. I was going to tell about these kids who came from like 20 years ago and they're like, man, nothing has changed here, but story for another day. Secondly, don't let this one scare you. Creating a new Sunday morning worship service. Don't let that scare you. All I simply mean is we're going to get creative. We're going to get creative. We're going to have testimonies shared. We're going to have upbeat music. What Melissa's been doing. She's been trying so hard. Thank you, Melissa. Sincerely. I'm so thankful. And look, don't let music scare you either. Because believe it or not, I love hymns. I love hymns. I love them being modernized, but I love hymns. And so we're not going to take away your hymns and stuff like that, but we are going to, hopefully by God's grace, start singing more modern music and stuff in the church. We're going to have announcement videos instead of live announcements. We're going to, this is a big one, and I'm shocked the deacons weren't like, no, but we're going to stop passing the offering plate. We're going to stop. I mean, we're going to wean it out, so over the next 6-8 weeks, however long we decide, next week when you come in here, as long as they come in, you're going to have an offering box on that wall and on the back wall. Why are we doing that? For one, it's not biblical to pass an offering plate, and for two, why do we want to compromise our guests coming into our church and the way they feel about coming into church? Thirdly, Jesus says, practice your righteousness before Him alone and not before men. Passing a plate is practicing our righteousness before man. Y'all watch. Don't lie. Y'all watch who's putting money in the offering plate? Who doesn't? No, not one hand. Thank you for your honesty. We watch. So little things like that, we are going to change. Here's a big one that's going to be hard for you. Outside of a couple bigger things, the number one complaint that people had with our service, can any of you take a guess? I'm curious. I'll give you a hint. It's at the end of the service. Not the altar call. Holding hands. Guys, nobody likes that except for you. I mean, I'm not just trying to sound harsh. Like, I literally had somebody say who was a visitor here, I had to lie in church and tell them I was sick and didn't want to pass my sickness to them. That way I didn't have to hold their hand. Like, guys, I mean, we could keep doing it, but I would recommend we maybe say, hey, look, if you know the person beside you want to hold their hand, hold it. But let's not make this a requirement of everybody who walks to the church on a Sunday. No, we're not going to go there. So don't let this scare you. Little things are going to change with the service. And now, third is we're going to prioritize our guests. Again, time, I'm going to try and go quickly. Prioritizing our guests means one thing, that we're going to value them being here. Not that we don't now, but we're going to be very intentional about it. We are going to be intentional. We're creating a position called the Connections Team Leader, which is going to be Adam, again, calling out Adam. He did this for us at The Rock and in various capacities, my last ministry. And what his goal is going to be very intentional to train a group of people around him to be intentional with our guests who are showing up on Sunday mornings. Additionally, we are hopefully within the next 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, we are creating a connection, what do we call it, Adam? Connection Center, which is going to be right out these doors, 101, where we're going to clean it up, modernize it. We're going to have a cafe and a place where visitors before the service and after the service can hang out and get connected with us in the church. So we're going to prioritize them. Prioritizing them starts with getting the place ready for them as well. I need to keep pointing that out. We will have proper signage in the facility. People walk around who are new here, just looking around. I remember Raymond, his first week, I didn't know if he was new or not. And I was like, hey, Raymond, man. Or I was like, hey, nice to meet you. And he started kind of like looking around. I was like, do you know where you're going? He's like, nah, man. I was like, well, let me take you. Like, we don't know where to go when you come on our campus. It's a pretty big campus. So we're going to have proper signage going up. Even in the parking lot, I don't know if you noticed that the first section here, there's yellow lines, not white. We haven't implemented it yet, but those yellow lines are going to be for our visitors. We're going to put up visitor parking signs with signage pointing them into the campus, leading them into where we're at. So we're going to do little things like that to change along the way. Fourth, we are going to be very intentional about this. We will train leaders to lead in God's church. Part of the vision that you guys, some of you know it well, some of you have vaguely heard it, is bringing in interns to serve, men who want to serve in pastoral ministry, who are going to come to Gateway and be trained. And part of that process is having the second floor down on the educational wing turned into dorm rooms for men. Adam is currently our first of, I'm praying 4, 5, 6 guys at one time who are going to be intentionally trained by me and others here at the church to be pastors here at the church, to be youth pastors perhaps, to be on the worship team, to be children's pastors, to hopefully be people who stick around here at Gateway long term, but also people who we will, by God's grace, send out to different parts of Miami, that we will send out to different parts of the world to be pastors and leaders around the world. We are going to take this extremely, extremely seriously. Guys, we shouldn't lose sight of one thing. And Adam, I love you. I hate to keep putting a spotlight on you. We have a 23-year-old man sitting in our sanctuary who loves Jesus like nobody else I've met, to be honest with you, who wants to be a pastor, who wants to be equipped to be a pastor. God has brought him in our midst to be trained. Guys, we should celebrate that. We should be so thankful that God is doing that. But we want more. I'm going to be greedy. Lord, I'm greedy. Send more. Send more. So we're going to keep training. What else we got coming up? Continuing our community groups. I'm not going back on what I said. We're going to make a decision this week whether or not everybody wants to stay plugged into our community groups. If not, we're going to have a Bible study back here at the church like we always have. Me personally, I'm staying in the community group. I've seen value in it. I've seen value now. I've seen value in the past. I see that the place where disciples are going to be naturally made, where we're going to multiply these groups, where we're going to see Miami impacted with the gospel. Here's the point where I'm going to start flying through. We will prioritize our youth ministry. What I was saying earlier, a lot of times they're just second class. We don't think about them. We don't prioritize our youth in churches. They don't get budget line items. They don't get new stuff. They don't get updated stuff. They don't get taken care of. But here's the thing. When I say we're going to prioritize our youth, I mean, yeah, let's make the place look awesome. But we've got to prioritize them as brothers and sisters in Christ. Like they are our brothers and sisters in Christ. So they should be trained and equipped and discipled just like adults are being. So we are going to prioritize that. And we have a system, which, again, I was planning on sharing, but I won't share for the sake of time. We have a plan in place and how we are going to make that happen. I would love to see us prioritize a full-time or even part-time youth pastor moving forward to help, because it is a huge commitment. But prioritize. One thing I have to know, guys, this is important. If you work in children's ministry, one of the most immediate changes that we are making is every single person, whether you've been doing it for a day or 60 years, has to get a background check, and we are going to do that within the next 2 to 3 weeks or so. So if you are against that, I'm sorry. It's the world we live in, and it's not that we don't trust you, but it's due diligence that a church has to do in the world that we live in. And for parents coming in, I want to know that my kids are being protected. So that's our way of saying to new prospective people, everybody's had a background check. So be prepared for that. I'm going to put that in Sharon's lap. So if y'all are mad, just be mad at Sharon. It was all her idea. I'm kidding. It wasn't. It was somebody else's, but I'll keep the name in here. But I agree with it 100%. Next, we're almost done, guys. We're starting Gateway 101 class. It's going to be next month. This will be a class for people who are new to Gateway, who want to know more about Gateway, or if you've been coming for a while, you want to know how to become a member, or what it means to be a member, what it looks like to be a member, what you could expect from us as far as your walk with Jesus, and what we should expect from you. We're going to be starting that. We're going to be starting a school of discipleship. This is not going to start until January, but I wanted to throw it out there. Again, it's going to probably be a Sunday night where we take a pertinent topic in our community or in our culture, and we talk about it and train you and equip you, whether it's apologetics or money or whatever it might be. We're going to be doing that as well, and I won't be the only one leading that, because again, we've got to be training leaders. We've got to be equipping leaders to do the work of the ministry. Next, we will have a strong online presence, which we are starting to, Facebook, YouTube, and all of that. One of the things that I've been working on is a new modern website. It's not 100% done, but it should be hopefully within the next couple weeks again. But I wanted to show you kind of the screenshot of, oh, that looks terrible. That didn't transfer right. That looks dreadful, guys. So don't picture that being it. But I wanted you to kind of just get a grasp, like what we're going to start turning our attention to, what you're going to start seeing the branding being is, I hate to use that word in church, but these three key components: loving God, loving people, and making disciples. And the imagery of Miami. It's not all about here. It's about the city that God has placed us in, and hopefully, by God's grace, that we all love. The second thing we were doing is updating a logo. I bombed it. I gave a dear brother what I thought would be a cool logo. Everybody despised it. And so what I did is I went to a guy who was a graphic designer back in Delaware, and I said, look, here's the vision. The vision is we want to reach where we're at. We want to ultimately reach Miami. We want to reach the end of the world with the gospel. Get creative. And so this, hopefully this transferred right. This is going to be our new logo. So what you see, obviously modern font, the logo, the city of Miami skyline, if you don't know that by now, with the cross that's illuminated, that is our heart, that is our desire. We want to know Miami, or we want to see Miami reach for Jesus. So that logo is going to keep that at the forefront of our minds and our mission. Here's some of the ways it could be used. It shows on a coffee mug, a bag. This is scripture, Matthew 7:14. Just kind of the font on a door, but we don't have glass doors here. It's kind of weird. We don't have glass doors. Oh, yeah, it's hurricanes. Thank you. And then this is a quick one I would love, is plan for future staff. Again, God is going to grow this church, guys. He's going to grow it. I want to see paid youth pastors. I want to see higher paid worship pastors. I want to see assistant pastors coming on staff. So we will prioritize for that. And then the last slide. Constantly evaluating what we're doing. I said this last week, and I think some of y'all were scared. It was 2 weeks ago. Is that if there's dead branches in the church that are sucking energy and resource from the church, we got to chop it off, and we got to allow Jesus to work in healthier ways. So constant evaluation of what we are doing. So here's my final slide, and this is the one that I need help with. I need you. Not only do I need you guys to step up and see the vision and see the potential and how we can reach people for Jesus, but we need you to help financially as well. I know, talking with Nelson and some of the deacons back in the day before we built all the structures here, there's a campaign together we build, and you guys stepped up. Some of you are still here. You stepped up. You helped. But now we got to do together, we rebuild, because we need so much help. We need so many resources to start fulfilling some of this vision. And so what I'm calling you to is one of the things I mentioned was our bathrooms need done. And so our first phase of this vision is going to be Gateway family. We need $10,000 at least to get at least one or 1.5 done, but the primary one behind us. So our first campaign of a few, I'm not going to lie, is we want to raise $10,000. And every week we're going to maybe put in the bulletin or put it up on the slides how much we've raised towards that. But if you want to help with that, just on your tithe, or not your tithe, still give the money to the church, or we'll be closing everything down. If you additionally want to help, put on their Project Gateway. Here's the good news. God has already started contributing to us. He has already heard our prayers. He is the one that's given the vision, and He is now starting to provide. I know He's going to provide for you guys, but this is what came in the the mail of this week from Florida Baptist Convention, a check for $10,000 to help us revitalize the church here at Gateway. And we are excited about that. So yeah, we can thank, that's awesome. That's awesome. So we are going to plan on using this, and hopefully you guys step up. I know some of you might think it's just bathrooms. Keep the vision of it in mind. Keep the vision of what you're doing. You're helping welcome guests and potential followers of Jesus into the church, guys. So again, weighty, but it shouldn't be. It was an honest assessment of where we find ourselves. But it's also an honest assessment of where we could go and how we could recover and how we could rebuild the walls in Jerusalem like Nehemiah did. We are going to be a church that values disciple making, young, old, all over the place. We're going to be a church that values visitors. We're going to be a church that puts action behind our beliefs, not just beliefs that don't lead to action.